I want to talk about the Florida students, the Florida high school students, what I'm going to call the student movement, in response to the Valentine's Day shooting at the Marjorie Stone Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. I want to talk about those students. And I know by the time you hear this, you've been hearing a lot about them. And as I tape this show, I am taping it on February 22nd, just 8 days after the shooting, 8 days after the horror that took place at that school. Now, that shooting, in which 17 people were killed, 14 students and 3 adults, I think all 3 were teachers, that shooting happened on a Wednesday. By Saturday, that would be the 17th of February, the survivors of the shooting, and I always use the word survivor. I don't believe in victims. I mean, obviously, people are absolutely victimized. And in this shooting, so many were. Hundreds of students were victimized, either directly by being shot or wounded, murdered or wounded, or through emotional trauma. But I believe in the phrase survivor because people do survive things. And when you survive, that makes you somebody to be highly, highly respected. All right, at any rate, by Saturday the 17th, the survivors of the shooting were calling for an assault rifle ban. And I don't want this to be about guns. I believe in the Second Amendment. I also believe that it's not absolute. I don't want to get into that discussion. What I want this to be about is the idealism of those students. That idealism forged out of tragedy, out of horror. And one of those students, Emma Gonzalez, is somebody that I want to highlight. Now, we have seen, I'm not kidding you, I have seen so many of these students on television giving interviews and speaking far more eloquently than I could ever do, and certainly far more eloquently than most of our elected officials. But on February 17th, Emma Gonzalez, this, lightning bolt of a human who stood before a crowd and gave a speech that lasts maybe about 12 minutes. And I would urge you, if you've not heard her speech, I would urge you to go and find her speech online. All you have to do is Google Emma Gonzalez, Gonzalez, speech. That's all you have to do is Google that, and it will come up. If you've seen the speech, go back and watch it again. And there are a couple of things in that speech that I want to just highlight of what she says. I'm going to give you a long quote, and I know it's difficult to do on the radio when you don't have something to read along, but just bear with me. Here is in part of what Emma Gonzalez said on February 17th. Quote, "We are going to be the kids you read about in textbooks, not because we're going to be another statistic about mass shooting in America, but because, just as David said, we are going to be the last mass shooting. Just like Tinker v. Des Moines, we are going to change the law. That's going to be the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in that textbook, and it's going to be due to the tireless efforts of the school board, the faculty members, family members, and most of all, the students. The students who are dead, the students still in the hospital, the students now suffering PTSD, the students who had panic attacks during the vigil because the helicopters would not leave us alone, hovering over the school for 24 hours a day, period, unquote." Powerful, incredibly powerful, eloquent, smart words. And what I think was so incredibly smart about this is that she, this is not about her. She tells the world that the school board, the faculty members, the family members, that they are all powerful forces, that they deserve credit for what change is coming, and that this is going to be a unified effort. It's not a bunch of crackpot students going off and marching down a street with some placards that they've created. She goes on in her speech, and it's just, it's an incredible speech. If you are an idealist, it's a speech that grabs you and won't leave you alone. But she goes on to say another thing, and I'm going to quote one last quote from her. And here we go. Quote, "The people in the government who are voted into power are lying to us. And us kids seem to be the only ones who notice, and our parents to call BS. Companies are trying to make caricatures of the teenagers these days, saying that all we are self-involved and trend-obsessed, and they hush us into submission when our message doesn't reach the ears of the nation. We are prepared to call BS. Politicians who sit in their gilded House and Senate seats funded by the NRA telling us nothing could have been done to prevent this, we call BS. They say tougher gun laws do not decrease gun violence. We call BS. They say a good guy with a gun stops a bad guy with a gun. We call BS. They say guns are just tools like knives and are as dangerous as cars. We call BS. They say no laws could have prevented the hundreds of senseless tragedies that have occurred. We call BS. That us kids don't know what we're talking about, that we're too young to understand how the government works. We call BS. Unquote. On February 20th, those students, including Emma Gonzalez, traveled 400 miles to the Florida State House in Tallahassee to vote for a vote to at least get on the docket in Tallahassee consideration of an assault ban bill. But even before all of the buses got to Tallahassee, there was a vote about denying that topic to come up, even to get on the agenda for the legislature. There was a vote along party lines that denied considering such a bill. That vote was largely on party lines, 36 in favor of getting at least consideration of an assault rifle ban, 36 in favor and 71 against. We have students showing up on television, giving eloquent interviews. One dad even said his son was way better than him as a speaker. The reality is that these kids who on the morning of February 14th, because the shooting happened about 3 o'clock, on the morning of February 14th, kids who were in class who had no idea and no inkling and no inclination to be doing anything about gun violence, those kids have turned into a political force in America. And the reality is they are leading us. They are leading you and me. They believe in the power to change the system. They believe that passion and common sense will prevail. And they are scaring the NRA. The kids are starting to be criticized, and there are being false claims made about the kids as student actors. And in the end, isn't this what it's all about? That teaching our kids about democracy and teaching them about the power of everyone to have a say. Isn't it about getting people motivated? On March 14th, there'll be a 17-minute walkout for schools across America to represent a month from the shooting and 17 victims, 17 dead. And on March 24th, they're organizing a march in D.C., which I have no doubt is going to attract hundreds of thousands of people. And remember, this isn't just some group of 17-year-olds. They are survivors of a mass shooting in which 17 fellow students and teachers died. That is what makes it difficult, and that is what makes it so incredibly powerful. You've been listening to me, Ellie Krug, on Ellie 2.0, a different kind of radio show, one that taps into the idealism that all of us have for a longer, better life, one that's more inclusive.